Hi, I'm Hanina Al-Sharawi and welcome back to Coding with Girls. If this is your first time here and this is your first time coding, I highly recommend you go visit our first video in the playlist, which is Coding with Girls Key Terms, and I'll just attach it right up in the eye. And if you missed last week's video about block code, also I'll be attaching that in the eye right now. Please go visit that. It's a step before this. And everything again is in the playlist, and you can watch everything, and the place will be linked in the description below and at the end of the video. So, welcome back. Today we'll be talking about the pathway of languages. So what we'll basically be discussing is the different types of programming languages, the difference between high-level languages and low-level languages, and the uses of these different languages. So okay, what if I want to go into this field? What language should I learn? Because not all languages perform the same task equally. Some are good at certain things, while some other ones are better at other things, and we'll be going through that today. So before we go through that, we should talk about what is a programming language. So it is a form of notation that allows users to function and create algorithms. This is typically defined through a form of documentation and formal language. So this is basically just your coding. You have your block code can kind of count as a programming language. Some people count things like SQL as programming languages, and they say coding languages are things like Python and Java and like the ones that actually code, and then they say like programming languages are basically HTML, which is a markup language, which we'll get through to later on, and they count those as programming languages, and coding languages are basically the more precise ones, which we'll explain right now. This is like an example of a piece of code I've done, but yeah. So now we have low-level languages. So they're basically binary is a form of low-level language and is a form of machine code. And then we have assembly, which is like a step above it. Like it's easier than typing in binary 100%, but it's still very hard, and is basically uses abbreviations and hexadecimal, like BASIC is a form of this. And this is typically not used by humans on the day-to-day. This is basically programmed into the computer, and your computer translates into this because this is what the computer can only read in binary. And using this does give you more control over hardware and everything, and also allows you to completely optimize your code to the specific system, but also the chances of needing this discrete of customization and this much control over your hardware is very slim, and usually you can get you will barely ever need to go into this. You can usually use a high-level language. Speaking of which, high-level languages, we have two types of high-level languages. So the first type are the ones that cannot automatically complete memory management. So you kind of have to assign memory to it and how your memory is structured, and which can seem quite tedious. And if you're making something very basic, it is quite tedious. But when trying to use it for a greater system and everything, it is much more beneficial. So an example of this is C or C++. C++ is my personal favorite coding language, and this does come as a surprise to some people because it's quite a tedious language, but it does give you so much room for customization and ability that it's just my favorite. And so it's like people tend to count them as low-level languages, but they're not really low-level languages. They're just on the lower end of a high-level language. The second are languages that automatically complete memory management, such as Python or Java. And you have less customization with these when it comes to memory and hardware abilities, but it does have it does it for you automatically to do that, so it does save time and is less tedious. Also, those languages are much closer to English and are more natural for you to learn than C or C++ is, so they do come easier to people. C++ is kind of like C but with add-on of abilities, which is why I personally like it a lot. And yeah, so because these Python and Java is very easy for people to learn because it's very close to English, people tend to use it. And they also have a lot of ability because they have much because a lot of things are already defined and automatically completed, there are a lot of libraries that can be done without having to be like, oh, there's a prerequisite of you having this stated because it's already done for you. So now what can you do with your coding? These are 3 examples of what you can do, but you can do so much more. We're just going to go through these 3 examples. This is web development, game design, data science. You can go through cybersecurity, app development, which is kind of similar to web development, but the server structure is a little different. And you can go through web development, game design, data science, cybersecurity, app development, virtual and augmented reality. There is so much for you to do in coding. These are just some 3 examples that I felt would give you 3 very different kind of perspectives. So first we're going to be talking about web development. Web development is one of like the most common things that people imagine when they think of like coding or creating a website. So the most common language, like one of the most important languages for you to learn, is HTML, which is hypertext markup language. But hypertext markup language, HTML, is again considered a programming language but not a coding language, because you can't, it's very basic, you can't really do functions or of this with it. It's just title and formatting, which also goes hand in hand with CSS. But I know personally that's the first programming language I learned, because it was very easy to do, and I went to learn on JavaScript, which goes hand in hand with HTML, so it was very easy to just combine the 2 and do it at once. JavaScript as well is very good for web development. It goes with HTML, which is a very basic standpoint, so it can be, and has a lot of resources and libraries and communities out there for you, so you can build so much almost already built, and there's so much help online if you do need. The third is Python, which I think most people have heard of. It's one of the most common languages people learn. Python is again it's a relatively new language, and it has so many capabilities, and is on the higher end of a language, so it has like very long like compilation times, with interpretation times, and which is how like they translate it into machine code. But it again has so many capabilities, so many libraries, so much community that it's much easier to develop. And with HTML and JavaScript, you also have very good server communication. You also do have that with Python, where it works with the server really well. And then we have SQL. SQL is also like HTML, and it's just like a programming language, not a coding language. SQL is just structured query language, which is basically how they interact with databases, and it's required if you want to have a database of something, like maybe a database of logins or anything. Like, for example, one of the apps I've built uses a database of all like the usernames and passwords, so that when people check, I go through the database and check that it's correct. You can create a database of, what can you create a database of? Anything really. Like it could be a list. It could be like your spreadsheet can be converted into a database. It could be of all like your sales or anything. Now we have Rust. Rust is a coding language, and it basically allows programmers to efficiently manage their memory without garbage collection, so you don't have all these random things that do tend to make your files heavy that are not required, which do come with other like high level languages. But there is a very steep learning curve, so it's really hard. Like once you start learning it gets hard very quick, and there's lesser libraries to be used because less people use it, so there's less development on it for less libraries. But there are people obviously online who know how to code this, and there would be Reddit pages, GitHub that you can use. And yeah, but also it does have a long compilation time, which does make a difference when you have a lot of things you need to compile. But if you're doing small things, it is really not, it shouldn't make too much of a difference. But if you're, let's say, you're compiling code that has like 1,000 inputs, 1,000 might be okay, even like 20,000, 30,000, 300,000 inputs, it's going to be very slow. Next, we have game development. So game development is maybe one thing a lot of people who also do come into coding really like. And one of the things I like using game development to explain is that you have your coding, but with your coding you have your game engines where you design, you it has more like, they both have very artistic places, but this is where you like really design your characters, and people who really like stories, this is where you put them in. So C++ has a very large community, and it's used in games such as Minecraft, World of Warcraft, and League of Legends. Unfortunately, it is relatively hard to learn for beginners, but again, my favorite language, so if you guys would like to learn it, I highly recommend. And it has very good use with some game engines. It does, and it's very fast with game engines as well. Then we have C#. These are two separate languages. I know that some people get them mixed up because they have like symbols after them, but they're two separate things. C# is used in game engines such as Unity, but it's mainly created with Unity, so it's very dependent on it. So it's very hard to use it with any other game engine, but so it like kind of requires Unity. But Unity is a very amazing game engine, and it's not, relying on Unity is not too much of a con because it's a good game engine to be using. Also, using any other game engine would just not make it run effectively at all, and it's very fast and efficient while on Unity. It is used in games such as Pokemon Go and Stardew Valley, so it is quite commonly used. Next, we have Swift. So Swift is a coding language made by Apple, and hence is mainly used for like Mac OS, iPad OS, and iOS products. It is easy to learn, however, is very limited support with game engines because it's kind of just limited to Apple products. So there's not a lot developed for it, and it is relatively new compared to other like languages. It has very great features in building, and it can be very easy for beginners to learn. It's used in games such as Hero Dom and Skill Zone, but again, has that issue that it's like very hard to make with with game engines. Also, if you want to know, Swift also helps with you can use it for app development, which I did not talk about here, but for app development it's also really great if you're developing for iOS and iPadOS or macOS, because it's made by Apple for Apple products, and you can use your Xcode, and the Apple also has Swift Playground to help you learn how to use it. It is an amazing tool, and it's one of the latest languages I've learned, and it was quite fun to learn, to be honest. It's not too hard, and there's so much great things you can create with it quite quickly also in your learning process. So last is Python once again. It's very good for easy to learn, and it is very good for prototyping. However, Python has no ability again for memory management or hardware control. So when you're creating games and you want to like maybe change something about like your keys or some of this, it's quite hard to do that, and that's like its backlash. But everything else, like with the libraries, it is amazing, and I highly recommend for a beginning, and you guys will see why after this. It is also used in games such as like Mount and Blade, Toontown, and Battlefield 2, and I'm pretty sure Fortnite was created on Python. I have to double check that, but I'm pretty sure it was. There are amazing things created with Python. So now we are going on to data science. So data science is something that like is really it's been up and coming, but it's like a lot of people are also coming to it now, thinking it's quite cool because it's analyzing and coming to conclusions based on data. And a lot of people who do like stocks and stuff like this do use data science to figure things out. I know I personally used it for making some stupid projects that I've made. Maybe like I've done some analysis on like Pokemon characters, or like Titanic survivors versus, unfortunately, the people who passed away on the ship. And it's really cool to learn about it and see what the computer can analyze for you based on it. But so first you have Python. That's what I used, and it is quite, again, easy to read and understand. However, it is so much slower than the rest of these. So again, that does come with it because it's slow, but it is good to use. Also, we have SQL again because it's databases, and you have to use your queries on your databases. SQL must be in that list. And then we have R, which supports various data types and has a lot of libraries that can be accessed and have like high quality of graphs. visualizations and resources. It can be difficult to learn, and the functions can be much slower, and takes up a lot of memory. But I do think it's an amazing thing to use if you are going solely into data science and really want to focus on that. It is an amazing language to learn. I personally have learned a little bit of it. I haven't gone too much into it because I don't study too much data science. I've just done a little bit in it, dipped my foot in the water, but it is a great tool to use. Next we have Java, which is relatively simple to learn. It is harder than Python, I will say, but compared to like C or C++, it is easy to learn. And and also to compile and debug, it's also quite simple. However, it does have, again, slower speed and greater memory consumption, which typically does come with those high level languages. And lastly, we have C. C, this can be said about C and C++. They both work very well for this. And C can develop and fine-tune statistical and data tools. So it's a fast language at compiling. But again, as said about C++, it is hard to learn for beginners. But again, it has that customization that comes with being like a lower level, high level language. So it does create some like place for customization and specifically getting what you want from your data to like the T, and making your data look exactly how you want it to look, like representation wise, and it's really good in that way. So what will this course entail? During this course, we are going to be using Python for the reasons like basically stated in this video, that it can be used with basically any application of coding, and it is really good for beginners to learn. It was like the third language I learned after I learned JavaScript, and it's a beast of a language. There's so much to always like learn about it and develop on your knowledge in it. There's so many libraries, so much community. It's so fun to learn. Also, that's the most important thing. And yeah, so also the speed and stuff that comes as like a con of using this language can easily be avoided, and we will not be running anything too long. At that length will make a difference. We will also be using an IDE, which we went through last video. If you need to refresh on that, I will be putting it in the eye above, called Visual Studio Code, or Visual Studio Code, which is also known as VS Code. It is commonly used by developers themselves, so we'll be using the professional thing. One thing is you have to run this on laptop. You cannot do this on your iPad. So I would recommend going on laptop straight away and using Visual Studio Code. However, if you are on iPad, you can be, and you don't have access to a laptop, you can be using Replit. It's a very beginner thing to be using, to be honest. And there is such a community on Replit that you can use, and when you're building small projects, you can put it up there and everything. But to be developing bigger projects, I would advise always Visual Studio Code, because you can input things, you can put like your own functions, you can input other apps into it. A lot of things are integrated into it because it's a very common IDE to be using. Also, there is in my opinion, the best debugger system there is in any IDE. So when you have a bug in your code, you can stop it and like go through it, and it's really beneficial. So I'll be going through how to download that in the next video, but if you would like to jump on it right now, it's quite simple. You can Google it up, and yeah. Also, throughout this video, all the languages I would mention during this video, I'll be linking channels and or playlists that you can go learn those languages if you would like. I do recommend staying with us and learning Python, but just in case. And yeah. So once again, thank you for watching. Please subscribe, like, and comment if you have any questions, or email me. My email will be in the description once again, and even if you go to the channel, press on the description, my email's right there. You can press either one. Thank you. And if you'd like, there should be a circle above where you can subscribe, and to continue watching the playlist, there should be a playlist right there, or go back and watch some videos. See you guys, and bye.